Diolch, Rodri. Prynawn da a chroeso I chi gyd am ddod heddiw. Good afternoon and thank you all for coming today. I'm Ben Lloyd, Head of Policy for WCDA. This is the fifth and the penultimate session in our Different Futures Wales webinar series, where we're discussing the impact of COVID-19 and its possible implications for the future. We know that the future isn't yet set, and we want to help facilitate the voluntary sector's voice in shaping better futures for Wales. So the last four sessions have been about some of the mechanics of how the voluntary sector has operated in the last few weeks, looking at issues like sustainable funding and volunteering. And the next 2 weeks sessions focus more on longer term policy issues, and were both chosen by online poll. So this week, as you'll know, we're discussing the impact on the climate emergency, and next week we'll be discussing the sector's role in looking at a wellbeing economy. Unfortunately, simultaneous translation isn't available on this platform at this moment in time, but we are encouraging everybody who wishes to contribute in Welsh to do so in the chat box, or you're also welcome, if emailing comments, to do that in the language of your choosing. And as well as this webinar, we'll also be gaining information from the surveys that many of you will have filled out on registration for this event. Richard Newton Consulting will be drafting a report from each of the sessions, so the 4 previous ones and the next 2, as well as a final report. So that will be available at the end of this webinar series. And Jess Blair, who's been working with us on these sessions, will also be writing a quick blog on each session, and we're hoping that the blog for this session will be available at the start of next week. And then we hope to use the information to feed the reports into the Welsh Government, amongst others, to make sure that they're aware of the voice of the voluntary and charitable sector on these issues. And the conversation obviously doesn't stop here, so if you want to carry on the conversation online on social media, please use the hashtag #DifferentFuturesWales, # ddyfodol gwahanol Cymru, and we'll continue that conversation together online. Just a quick reminder of people to turn off their microphones and cameras unless they are talking. It helps with the recording and also make sure that everybody has enough bandwidth to be able to follow the conversation. So I'm just going to hand over now to our chair for today. Rocio Cifuentes is the CEO of Ethnic Minority and Youth Support Team, often known as EAST, and she's also a WCDA trustee.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for the invitation and for asking me to chair this important session. As Ben just said, I am a WCVA trustee, and my day job is I run the Ethnic Minorities and Youth Support Team charity, which supports ethnic minority people in Wales. But I was really thrilled to be asked to chair this session, with the huge disclaimer that I'm by no means a climate change expert. However, I do live on the planet, so I declare an interest in that sense. But I'm just really looking forward to just facilitating the interesting discussions that I'm sure will take place over the next hour. I've already seen that WCVA has invited a lot of response on this topic, and really, these are fundamental questions and conversations to be having at this time, in terms of what the impact of this crisis has already been and is going to be in the future. It's trite but true to say that every crisis brings opportunities, and opportunities for change which can be positive or negative. And so I think those are some of the key questions that we'll be asking in the session. So, to what extent? Thank you very much. So there they are. So yeah, what are the possibilities? What change can we now envisage and propose and make happen that maybe wouldn't have been possible or thought possible before this situation? We've already had lots of feedback and response about obviously the huge numbers of people working from home now, the decrease in air pollution, the number of people now walking and cycling more. And all of that is hugely positive and makes us optimistic for the future. But at the same time, we have to recognise the challenges which a potential financial crisis brings to the climate sector. People have also asked, does this situation mean that climate change is further down the agenda compared to before this crisis? So, as I said, I'm no expert. I'm just here to facilitate your input and your ideas. So, I'm looking forward to this rich discussion. But thank you. So, yeah, just kind of, following on from that kind of brief introduction, we know that this situation is unprecedented, and it feels trite to be repeating a lot of these words. So, you know, and the impact has been both positive and negative. So does anybody want to kind of kick off in terms of any, anything that you think has happened which has been really inspiring or has had a really positive impact in terms of the climate change discussions?
Hi, Rossio. Kenneth Moon has posted something about food banks that relates to this question. I don't know if Kenneth is available and would like to speak about the issue. And also Sabani Roy has posted a suggestion around cycle routes as well.
Hello.
Fantastic.
Do you want video as well, or just speaker?
If you're happy with video, it would be nice, but it's up to you.
Hello. So something that I noticed, I think a lot of other people noticed, is that the putting on the brakes in terms of everything that we do was a real benefit of COVID-19 in terms of our impact on the environment. So we saw, we saw nitrogen levels and carbon dioxide emissions plummet as everything shut down. Now, if you think about the declarations around a climate emergency that a lot of councils and town councils have been making, and also what a lot of the voluntary sector has been making, is what we've just seen, what a genuine declaration of a climate emergency might look like in terms of a stop. So we've then seen people responding to the crisis and stepping into a gap in leadership. Everything stopped. A lot of organisations we traditionally support went into hibernation, and community leaders emerged, and they've been amazing. But what they've been amazing at is responding to the crisis that their community was presenting with them, which was being able to pick up prescriptions, being able to get food parcels, and to support families who were shielding. And what we haven't done is work with those leaders who've stepped forward in this time of crisis to say, what's next? What do we do next with you as the leaders that have emerged now to support your community with the next step?
Thank you, Kenneth. Could you just say your organisation, if you represent any organisation?
So Interlink, Rhondda and Taff.
Okay.
So we're about to embark on a listening exercise to ask some of these questions about where communities want to go next.
Thank you. I think that what next question is one that I've heard a number of times now. Thank you for that. Sibani?
Hi, Lucio. Hello. Hi.
Sibani.
I'm Shibani from North Wales Association for Multicultural Integration, mouthful name. Well, we all like that there will be lesser car on the road, and we should encourage more and more cycle riders to go for work or whatever. But there are not many proper cycle-friendly routes in Wales. So car drivers and possibly, as I understand, cycle riders both are in tenterhook when we pass each other on the road. So, and also routes should be extended as well, route itself. So what is your opinion?
Thank you, Sibani. I've noticed that a few other people have mentioned cycle routes on the chat. So Ben, would you help me in suggesting?
Yeah, of course. So I guess there's a couple of questions, a couple of statements around fossil fuels, which relate obviously to transport amongst other issues, from Sid Dennis and Lizzie Wynn around councils and schools with traffic drop-offs. If either of you would have anything else you'd like to add on that, please feel free. And then after that, there's been Paul Allen has posted a question about timescales, which I'm hoping he might want to pose to the group and offer his thoughts as well.
Thank you, Lizzie.
Hi there. Yes, I'm noticing that the staggered drop-offs and pickups at schools are encouraging transport to now go right to the gate to the emergency routes rather than the drop-off zones. I'm from incredible Edible Porthmadog, and we have a food garden, which we're always encouraging people to keep the transportation and idling away from it, because it's around the school and around the leisure centre. And I'd hate to see this go backwards with staggered drop-offs, that people then use it as an excuse to get the cars closer and closer.
Thank you, Lizzie. Yes, I think, I mean, that links to the question of the car being seen as a safe mode of transport as well, which is a challenge in the context of reducing carbon emissions. Thank you. Who were the next people? Sorry, Ben.
Paul Allen, if he wishes to pose his question to the group.
Yes, happily. An actual rising to the climate challenge won't be a stop. It'll be a really, really busy period of installing lots of capacity of clean energy, of retrofitting buildings and rethinking transport systems. And if we're to gear up as a society to come up with ideas for that, is there a timescale, a timeline running to an economic recovery package for Wales, or an economic reboot package for Wales, that we can all be coming together and sharing our ideas to build the vision of what the transition would be to actually get Wales to net zero as quickly as possible, to maximise the co-benefits in health and in nature and other sectors?
Yeah, I think that the way that you are talking about a rebuilding and a refitting is really important. You're right. It's not about pausing anything or stopping anything, but it's actually going to require a lot of activity and a lot of imagination and work. You're right. And the question of how it links to the economic recovery and the time frame for that is absolutely fundamental. Ben, did you mention another?
Well, there's a bit, one of the sort of sub-conversations in the chat is about the context of the UK's withdrawal from the European Union and the potential impact on food and environmental standards, which David Smith had first flagged. David, if you have a few thoughts on how that relates particularly to the climate crisis, that would be helpful. And there's a few other people who've commented on a similar issue in there. So if you would like to speak as well, please do just feel free just to say I'd like to comment, and we'll try and call you in.
David Smith, are you able to comment? So if not, then Cheska Ross, you've been talking about think global, act local. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, really, it was just, it's come up in a number of these sessions that have happened. And it's echoing something that, sorry, I can't remember, the previous speaker was saying about how communities have really stood up and supported themselves long before, local services or councils were able to step in and help. And I think it's very much about how do we work at a county level, a regional level, to channel resources in to support those communities without squashing that community or bureaucratizing or formalizing that community spirit. And I think that's the big question. How do you balance it between enabling those communities to be resilient without squashing that spirit? And I think that's a big question we've got.
Yes, thank you. And I think that goes back to the what next question that that was asked at the very beginning by Kevin. And Fran is also re-emphasising the importance of the link of the timescales for recovery. Does anyone have any solutions, any proposals in terms of this big question of what next, and how do we harness that community, think global, act local action, and how do we structure that into something positive that can respond to this challenge? Any good ideas that you want to put forward?
Hello.
Hi, Kenneth.
Me again. So the conversations we've been having with the food bank in Pontypridd, now starting with the crisis people are struggling with at the moment, is often a good way to start the conversation. The food bank, we've been working with them for about 18 months, looking at how they work better with the town council, local authority and others to go beyond being a food bank and to being part of the solution to people. And we're now, my partner started a project called Grow Pontypridd, and there are quite a few grow networks emerging during the lockdown. There's quite a lot happening in Cardiff. Grow Rhondda's set up. So what the Grow projects are doing is providing people with starter packs. And what we're seeing is community growing happening in people's homes and gardens rather than in the allotments or community gardening spaces. So we're seeing community growing, but in private dwellings, and supporting people who are in food poverty or who are self-isolating or got mental health issues to start thinking about growing their own food, and then linking that back to the food bank, so that come the autumn, we're encouraging allotment growers to supply produce to the food bank and to start to create a local food network. But it's training and doing the skills alongside all of that so that people can actually then use that food to cook. Now it's turning that what is a problem for a lot of people into a potential solution. And I think this is one area where we can go, right, there's an interest in this issue. People are concerned about it. Here's an opportunity to work with people on practical solutions rather than have a conversation necessarily about climate change as a problem because it's too big for a lot of people to tackle. So it's finding a local way in or a practical way in for people.
And obviously the voluntary sector and the third sector infrastructure is crucial in that regard. Do you have any suggestions of the best way of linking the voluntary sector with those informal groups that are springing up?
I think it's being open to working outside our traditional voluntary sector mindsets. So, we're seeing interest from private sector companies to, one of them is they do roast dinners on a Sunday, but the boxes they use for the roast dinners, they get thrown away. They're recyclable, great, fantastic. But we're having a conversation with them about their customers bringing the roast dinner boxes back to the store. We then use those boxes to pack the plants in that go out to people. So we're starting to connect up people who are consuming food with people who want to grow food, and being really open to working with different partners.
I mean, a few people have commented that this is similar to maybe what happened post-war, people growing their own food. How much can we learn from that time? Are we in a completely different situation, or can we learn lessons?
I think.
Just go on.
Rosso, on a similar note to Kenneth's point around making things practical through local community initiatives, there were a couple of comments in the results that came out from the survey that people filled out on registration particularly around reconnection with nature and the land. And I was wondering if there are people who may have some expertise in that and how they're trying to use this as an opportunity to tackle the nature crisis, which obviously is directly connected to the climate crisis as well. So I don't know if there are people who would be able to provide some expertise on that who are on the call at all. If so, just pop a comment in the chat function and we'll call you in.
Claire, are you commenting, or is that about homeworking? Claire, like... yes, please. I don't know if that's yes, please, to commenting. Yes, Claire. I think you're still on mute, Claire.
Thank you. I'm Claire Stanley-Barry from Canal Cymru. Yeah, we had a summit this morning about the changing nature of work, and this was something that came up with the accelerated move to home working and the reduction perhaps in the need for office space and what's going to happen to those empty office buildings. And at the same time, we had Joe from the TUC saying more and more workplaces are thinking about this and coming on board with allowing workers access to green space and creating space for growing, for recreation, for more productive sort of walking meetings, working outside, not just for productivity, but for health benefits and also biodiversity. And I think what this is made us recognise is that the world is interlinked. We are very vulnerable in our current system. We can't afford to tackle these crises one at a time. We have to take simultaneous action for the climate, for the ecological crisis, and rebuilding our societies. So in terms of the nature crisis and the 6th mass extinction event that we're heading for, there are lots of opportunities, but we just have to look for them and make sure that, when we're building our active cycle highways and things like that, it's not just going to be tarmac, but, nature benefits can be incorporated. So that's all I want to say is that these things should be at the forefront of our minds, but it's not just about reacting to the immediate crisis that we're in, but, those other crises that are just around the corner, we do need to address simultaneously.
Thank you, Claire. I can see a couple of people have now given examples of the kind of projects that Ben was asking about. So Paul, Alan, you've mentioned is it the Centre for Alternative Technology? I'm assuming it is. And then Ellis Smits, the Local Nature Partnership. So would you both like to just say a few words about those examples and what we can learn from them?
Certainly. We have a wide range of courses that help people understand soil, help people understand trees and nature. And we also have Rewilding Yourself courses where you can actually have your owl ears and fox eyes and feel connected to nature. But of course, we've had to close. So we've flipped it to home delivery, where the cat at home gives ideas that you and your family can do to better engage, to better see, smell and touch nature in your own garden, for now at least.
Fantastic. Thanks for that example. Very innovative. And the Local Nature Partnership, is it Ellis?
Yeah, hello.
Hi.
How are you? I currently work for the local authority in Gwynedd, and I've just been put on the Local Nature Partnership project from January of this year. And what we are trying to do is create partnerships between the larger businesses like private sector, charities such as the North Wales Wildlife Trust, with community groups and community councils, and we're trying to create a sort of project where we link habitats such as habitat corridors, which is one of the examples that we have got in Gwynedd, such as the Groundwork North Wales project, where it's called Stepping Stones, which links the council estate in Carnarvon with the Triple SI, which is right next to it, and also linking schools, creating eco-bro groups, and also just trying to encourage children to learn more about the nature and their surroundings in the Hyn and also in the wider area of Gwynedd. However, it's a partnership of the local authorities and national park authorities. So it's a pan-Wales project, but we are focusing more on the local area at the moment due to the fact that we've only gotten the coordinators in the past 6 months. And hopefully by the end of 2022, we would have created a nature recovery action plan, as well as implementing this recovery and encouraging community well-being on the ground. So that's what the Local Nature Partnerships is trying to do, as well as educating older generation and the employee groups ranging from 16 to 65. So the middle group, which is the most lackluster when it comes to volunteering because of the time constraints. So that's what we are trying to do.
Hi, Rossio. Gethin Rees from Catene has raised a slightly different, but I guess related point about local communities and supply chains. Gethin, if you would like to come in and offer your thoughts on that, we'd be grateful. And then David Smith would like to come back in on the wider trade deal context as well.
Yeah, thank you. We've just, I and Susie Venturesfield and others have just finished a piece of work which will be published imminently, but sadly not today, looking at Brexit and climate change. And one of the things that we learnt by doing that piece, it wasn't where we started, is that those two issues come together on international trade. And it so happens that COVID-19 has very much drawn our attention to the huge vulnerability of relying on other countries to produce big swathes of the things that we need. In COVID-19, it's been personal protective equipment and ventilators, but of course it could have been a myriad other things. And suddenly we've realized that actually producing things locally is a good idea from that point of view. As a matter of fact, that also helps climate change, because all these lorries that are driving all over the world and all the things being flown all over the world are a major driver of climate change. You know, the wings made in Broughton for aircraft fly back and forth 7 times between France and Broughton, you know, and the cream that's in Irish, what's it called, the Irish whiskey, you know, goes back and forth between Northern Ireland and the Republic 5 times, and all this kind of thing. It's an incredibly wasteful way of producing things. But in terms of pure economics, it's what capitalism forces us to, because it's the most monetarily efficient. But we're now seeing that monetary efficiency imperils our planet, and it also imperils our health. And so it's actually a win-win. We can actually, I think, persuade people on a trade issue that has been very, very difficult to get people to engage with. They've actually seen now through the COVID-19 crisis how dangerous it is to run our world economy in this way.
Thanks, Gethin. Yes, and I've heard people question whether we're seeing the end of globalization, which I think is a really interesting question. David Smith, are you okay to say something about the green economy?
I am, and thank you for the opportunity of speaking. My name is David Smith, and I'm from Cooperatives and Mutuals Wales. I've actually just posted some brief details in the chat box about the triple crisis that we actually face, and I provide a link with an article from Tuesday's Guardian by George Monbiot, which I think is the best summation I've actually seen for a long time. He focuses on the US trade deal, and he makes the case that it will make Britain a paradise for disaster capitalists. And he's saying that chlorinated chicken is just the start, but government intends to rip up food standards, public services, and public protections. So I think while we're actually recognizing the need to work locally, I think it's also crucial that we understand the broader context in which we're actually having to operate. I think that, I mean, we know that trade deals are only negotiated by sovereign governments, so devolved administrations don't have a say in these deals. But I think there's plenty of work that can be done at the Wales level. And we're proposing at the moment, and very much open to discussing it with others, we're discussing the idea of a Welsh National Food Service unit. And I can provide more details later if people wish to contact me, and I'll put my email address in the chat box. But for me, the important thing is that what is happening at the local level, I think, can actually increase the groundswell, which will put pressure on supermarkets to actually label American products if they're substandard. And so that what we do is we're getting, if you like, a movement from below, which understands what's happening at the moment with food standards and other sort of public protections being abandoned as we go into a no Brexit deal, aligning ourselves regulatory with the US, with all the public health consequences and so on that arise from that. So I'll stop at that point, if I may, Chair.
Thank you, David. I believe Jess would also like to come in on green economy.
Hi, sorry I joined late, so I've missed some of the conversation, so excuse me if I repeat, but just picking up on the conversation that I've just heard in the last 5-10 minutes. WWF recently did a big report on the food system in Wales and the need for an integrated food system, and it touches on the participants who's just spoke around the National Food Service, the need to look at relocalization of supply chains, but also taking into account that in some cases this doesn't necessarily mean environmental benefits or improvements to climate change, or also environmental protections, because our production in Wales isn't necessarily sustainable at the moment in terms of our food production. So it's not a simple case of localization equals good. So I think you kind of really need, that's why we call it to be looked at kind of from kind of farm production right through to fork and consumption, because I think the challenge we have as well is, whilst people in this discussion might be aware of chlorinated chicken, etc., a bottom line for many people, especially in this COVID crisis with poverty, is food poverty is a significant issue. So cheap, accessible food needs to be recognised within this realm, and how you actually then switch to providing sustainable food at a local level, which is not more expensive, which it tends to be. So there's a whole issue around consumption, market, kind of market interventions that needed at a local level by government and business, and also all sorts of parts in this food system to enable kind of the change to kind of more environmental kind of food system. So have a look at our report. I can try and send a link to that, and be really interested in Shay's led on that, so please get in touch with Shay if you want to talk through some of that. And there's a food policy group, which is many members kind of from health, poverty, environmental organisations, all looking at this issue, both in terms of kind of what it was before when we produced the report, and actually how COVID has highlighted the very fragile system that we've got, and how kind of actually it might accelerate that system change that's needed. So there's a lot of work on that we can join up on. Obviously, food is part of the potential green economy transition. Kind of there's lots more that we're kind of looking at. Wales Environment Link are picking up on kind of green jobs, so not just jobs within the decarbonisation or kind of emission reduction sector, but also in nature conservation, innovation, green innovation, kind of academics. And trying to establish within that space not just the principles of a green and just recovery, but also kind of what that looks like in practice. And one of the main barriers that we're going to come up quickly against is the availability of investment to stimulate this green fiscal package. So we're also looking at kind of measures, fiscal measures that UK have hold of, versus what we might have levers on in Wales to kind of make that transformational change. And I think, you know, what we're asking for here is transformational change, and it kind of moves into the sum of billions rather than millions, and kind of how we get money or how we work together for innovative finance models, public, private and third sector is going to be critical. So I'll finish there. I hope that's helpful.
Absolutely, yes, thank you, Jess. Yeah, so much information and knowledge there. I can't see anybody with hands up or any pressing people who want to come in, unless I've missed somebody, Ben.
So there's a couple of different conversations going on in the chat box, which if I outline them, people who've contributed may want to comment more publicly. The first is around who pays for the costs of those byproducts of the economy which have a negative impact on the climate. Of course, currently the answer is no one, but whether there's a way that we want to look at how to adjust that, or how to reduce the costs on those organisations that don't produce those byproducts. And there's a second theme that's been coming through around education of young people, partly building on Paul's point around people being interested in nature and the environment, but CAP being closed and therefore it being more difficult to reach them, and a discussion around home economics and in the curriculum further on. So if anyone has any thoughts on those particular points, it would be and would like to speak, please just pop a comment in the chat box.
I also noticed earlier, I think Ruth was asking if there are any people here from green energy, kind of the green energy sector. I think that's right, Ruth. Or I think somebody also talked about the use of community buildings as electric charging points. So I think they're important points as well. If anybody would like to say more on any of those.
I'm going to challenge Matt Swan from Renew to speak up, because he's being very quiet about the amazing work the Renew network has been doing over the last few years.
Good challenge. Are you there, Matt?
Yes, I'm here. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Matt Swan. I work for Renew Wales in the central team, and we support a network of about 25 or so people, local coordinators around Wales, who work with community groups to discuss with them and facilitate a kind of action planning process in terms of working out how that group can do something about climate change in their context, and so it can be all sorts of different things, including food has been discussed, but also community energy efficiency in their buildings, and working out ways of improving recycling and so on. So yeah, we've got quite a very broad church in terms of who we kind of work with the third sector, but yeah, it's we put on events as well to bring together like-minded groups around food or energy or eco churches schemes and so on. So yes, obviously with the COVID crisis, we've not been able to do that physically, but we have been bringing together groups in virtual gatherings as well, and we're continuing to do so. So yes, if you haven't heard of Renew Wales and know of a group who might benefit, then please do get in touch.
Yeah, I have heard of Renew Wales, and I would be interested to if you have any kind of longer term suggestions for what you think the voluntary sector in Wales could do to capture this, to harness and capitalise on this moment and build on the kind of work that you're doing. What would your kind of recommendations or calls for action be?
Yeah, we do have Delith on the call as well. I know that you've been putting together. Delith also works for New Wales and has been putting together a response certainly to the Welsh government in terms of bringing together what we have understood from our community groups and other people. Del, do you want to say anything to that?
Hi everybody, thanks Matt for landing me in it, and thanks Ken for landing Matt in it. No, it's a good opportunity to say what Renew Wales is doing. In terms of what we put in the response to the Welsh Government sort of put out a fairly inconspicuous plea for people to get in touch, telling them how the recovery out of COVID could happen really. And as Matt has sort of said, we're a very big network of groups all across Wales, completely variable in size of organisation and the nature of what people deal with. So it was a bit tricky putting it together, but I think, one of the main things we were saying is that as has been mentioned already, is that you can't tackle coming out of COVID and climate change and economic crises all separately, and they need to be tackled together. And it was a plea really for holistic thinking and planning across all the government departments. We've agreed with a lot of stuff that we've seen coming out of CAT and the Centre for Climate Change and Social Transformations. There's been an awful lot of discussion in the media in general and on social media as well. But some of the issues we throw up are more general around food, like we've discussed already, reopening the economy, and dealing with climate and nature at the same time, and obviously low carbon travel and encouraging those kinds of things. It's a bit difficult to go into specifics, but we were trying to cover all the bases without it being a bit too picky, but definitely a plea that they take this opportunity to sort of start from scratch in a sense and plan things better. And I think we threw in a few examples from other European countries that have made huge claims about how they're going to plan things differently and rebuild from a green point of view.
Thanks, Stella. Yeah, I think what you just described as in how the challenge and the question is how do we put all of this together is really the big question. And I noticed that Ruth has commented is asking whether anybody has any thoughts on linking the foundational economy with the green economy, community wealth building. Does anyone have a master plan that you would like to share with us? Now is your moment, if you do. I can see a little hand by Jess, so go for it, Jess. I can't see anyone's face at the moment, but we can hear you.
Yeah, great. So I've been linking in with the Foundational Economy Network, which is run by Cardiff, Carol Williams, and has various local government thinkers, all sorts of people on it. And when I was looking at that agenda from afar, I noticed quite quickly that the environment was missing. So I've spent the last maybe 6 months longer working with that network to try and embed environment within that space, not just decarbonisation, capital, and to some extent footprint. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Intermittently.
Yeah. So we've been working with that network. We've held a work. It's quite a challenging topic because foundational economy is quite a fluid concept. People are trying to still explore what that means. And people like Ken might argue that they've been doing this for years. They just attached a different name to it now. I'd be interested in Ken's opinion on that. I'm really keen to have a discussion on this if anyone's interested, because yes, it plays an important part in this localization agenda and kind of social natural capital, but I just how it fits into the Welsh Government's wider green recovery fiscal stimulus package and its macroeconomics and kind of GDP growth is going to be quite critical. So I think if WCDA and others can play a space in this, we can certainly help with feeding in the environment aspect. And we've done a report as well on that, which I can share, which is also going to be in the paper that's been done by WCDA. Some of that report, so I'll share that to WCDA.
Thank you, Jess. Yes, and I think Kenneth has referenced the Welsh donut, which I've also heard of. But yeah, I think what I'm picking up is that at the moment nobody quite understands how it's all going to come together, given where we are now and the challenges that we face and the ambition that we now have to make the rebuilding a greener rebuilding.
Well, there's different levels at which we do this, aren't there? Sorry, Ken here. And until Welsh Government start measuring in a different way, then the drive from government level downwards, we're always going to struggle for leadership. So, like Jess' point, I've been involved in this stuff for quite a while, and essentially I gave up at the policy level because of the slow progress, and really focused on trying to make stuff happen in my own area. And so where I'm at now through Renew Wales, I've started working with some of the community council to have conversations in their local areas about what the community wants from them as a community council in terms of their land holdings. Now public land access is a real challenge for a lot of groups. you know, a group wants to do a sustainability project, they have to jump through so many hoops to get hold of a piece of land or a building and get permission to do what they want with it, and they give up. So the conversation with the community councils is, what do your community want from you? And it might be flood alleviation, it might be reducing livestock, it might be community growing, it might be energy generation. But have that conversation with the community, because until you have that conversation with the community, all you'll ever be interested in is bus stops and footpaths, and that's not what excites people.
We've a raised hand from Smits Ellis Griffith, Rossio, and then just while he's speaking, I'm just wondering if anyone has any final thoughts. We're running to the end of time on how we can influence government around these issues, or particularly influence government to connect all these different strands that we've been talking about today together.
Thank you. So, yes. Sorry, who did you say to come in now? Smits, Ellis.
Smits. Yeah.
Ellis, yeah.
Hi. So basically, when I just wanted to quickly surmise what everybody's been talking about with regards to what the community wants. In essence, the youth community, my age group and younger, what we actually want the government to do is produce jobs. We have the lowest employment rate in Europe, which shouldn't even be there, because we did create the Industrial Revolution in the 1700s with the coal mines and everything. We should be able to create the green revolution that Jeremy Corbyn was talking about in his agenda last December. As the Welsh, we should be the pioneers in going forward in green revolution. We shouldn't be waiting for somebody else to do it. Like the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act was one of the best acts created by any government in the world. Even Norway said it was amazing, but we haven't even answered any of the objectives of the act. The only thing, as a local nature partnership coordinator, I'm basically one of the aspects of the act. We need to now challenge the Welsh government to actually drive the UK government to actually implement tidal schemes in Swansea, or even try and create like jobs in the green sector, like with renewable energy, or even with wildlife conservation sector, because without nature we don't have well-being, and without jobs we don't have well-being. And I think as somebody who's going to be the future of this country, we really need to think about how we integrate the environmental issues with the economic issues that this country is having. Like without moving forward on the economic issue, we won't be able to move on the environmental issue. And that's what I'm thinking from my viewpoint, but I can't say for the whole of Wales. I'm just saying from somebody who's studied environmental management and also studied Welsh economics for a little while as well, just seeing that we're way behind every other country in the European Union at the moment with regards to economic aspects. And that's what I'm thinking we need to think about, especially Mark Drakeford, when he puts the green agenda in 2021, or whoever's in office in 2021. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Sorry.
No, thank you. And I think you're the first person who's mentioned the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act. And I think Ben was wondering why nobody had mentioned it. And as you say, it should be happening already. So the question is, why isn't it? Why aren't we creating these green jobs and creating, like you say, the green revolution?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a report on this with the third sector and Welsh Government, the Altogether report.
Okay, thank you, Jess. Could you perhaps share that in the link in the chat? Thank you.
Yeah.
So Kenneth is suggesting that the problem with the Future Generations Act is its reliance on PSBs, public sector boards, which are too removed from communities. So that is an interesting perspective, definitely. I know that we have just a few minutes left. So, Ben, is there anything pressing that we need to include before we finish?
No, I think everybody who's asked to speak has done so. So if you have a few concluding remarks, then I can close up at the end.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I haven't missed any hands up or any comments. Would anyone like to just add anything on the Future Generations Act and the opportunity and challenge it offers? Yes, Heledd? Heledd Morgan, would you like to? Yeah.
Hi there, everyone. Sorry, I've been sitting quietly, but I actually work for the Future Generations Commission and know some of you. I've been really interested in what you've all been saying and the links to some of the work that we've been looking at. And diolch, Ellis, for mentioning the act of being the first person to do so. We've just put together some of our initial thoughts about how we can, I suppose, to use the slogan, build back better. And I can't see the chat, unfortunately, but if people want to visit our website and go to the resources page, it's the first story on there. And I really welcome your views. Get in touch with us in the usual way. Contact us at futuregenerations.wales. It's all on the website. But you're right, the Act absolutely provides us with the right framework for economic, environmental, social and cultural recovery, hopefully. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Heledd. Somebody's suggesting taking Welsh Government to court, which I think legislative, yeah, that kind of power and civil, the capacity of civil society to take that kind of action is currently limited, but potentially we need to develop that. So in terms of the, this discussion is going to be written up as a report by the consultants that you mentioned, and WCVA. Obviously, this is an ongoing conversation, so all of these ideas will definitely be recorded and hopefully acted upon, but exactly what action and which of the suggestions are prioritized is really still quite open. So I think that the message is it's all to play for. So if you have a good idea, get it to WCVA, get it into the chat now, or email it later. If you find that you wish that you'd said something or you thought of something afterwards, please do get in touch with Ben and the team. This is a time when we need to have as many new ideas as possible. I'm just checking I haven't missed anything. There's another link that somebody's shared about the donut economics. I agree that the legislation and the policy framework is ripe in Wales, but how do we actually see that vision become a reality? That there seems to be something of an implementation gap so far. It's early days maybe, but maybe not. FGC 2020 is out. Thank you for that. And a few more examples of somebody incredible edible implementing the act. Okay. I think that's, yeah, I can't see any more pressing comments or any more hands up. If you want to say anything, just come in now, I guess.
Can I just comment? Sorry, can I comment?
Yes, please.
Can I comment that I think the key issue is how we bring together the triple crises that we have post-Brexit in terms of climate change and other issues that are that we've been discussing today. What are the very simple, practical things that we can actually do. And that's one of the reasons why Court Mutuals Wales, we've come up with the suggestion of a Wales National Food Service unit that will work in a collaborative way at all levels. It can't just be left to government. There isn't the capacity there. But I think working with people on the ground, we can actually shape the future of food policy in Wales. But we need to work as a collective within the third sector to make that happen. And then we'll actually see, I think, a triple dividend if we do so. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So could you just say your name? I didn't catch it.
David Smith from Courts Mutuals Wales.
Thank you, David. I just wanted to make sure. So yes, absolutely. The triple impact needs to happen to meet the triple challenge, I guess. And yeah, as I said before, WCVA are very much, one of the most important vehicles to bring those different voices and perspectives and ideas together. So I'm sure that Ben will say this too, but they really appreciate the engagement and the time that you're all giving at at this particular point, and all of your ideas, all of your your expertise, your different solutions and local activity that you're delivering. It all just helps to really paint a rich picture and a rich tapestry, which hopefully will help us to present part of the solution. So I'm going to hand back to Ben, because I think that's wrapped up from my end.
Thank you, Rossio, and thank you for chairing today. I'll be as quick as I can because we are at 5 o'clock. I know other people have other places to be, but just to say thank you to everybody for a really productive and useful conversation and chat. I just want to remind people that Jess's blog on the event will be available at the start of next week, and that the reports will be available shortly after that. And I know that Gethin had mentioned a report that he and WCIA had produced, which will be available, I think, next week. So just to keep an eye out for that as well. Next week is our last session, which will be the Wellbeing Economy session, which obviously we've talked a bit about today. So there's obviously some link between these two issues. And if you want to continue the conversation on social media, please use hashtag #DifferentFuturesWales or #nod ddyfodol gwahanol Cymru, or get in touch with the policy team directly at policyteam@wcva.cymru. I can see some people asking for the chat. If you would like a copy of the chat, please email policyteam@wcva.cymru and we can send you a copy if you can't store it. And then finally, just to say thank you to the staff team for facilitating this, particularly to Rossio for facilitating, not that Rossio is part of our staff team, but facilitating so well. And finally, mostly to you all for the really useful conversation and examples of your work on this agenda across Wales. So diolch yn fawr i chi gyd am ddod. Mwynhewch y noson.
Diolch.